There is a story we tell ourselves about the Voyager probes, and it is a beautiful story, a romantic story, the kind of story that makes us feel as though our civilization has already begun its long walk toward the stars. We imagine two golden ambassadors gliding serenely through a peaceful cosmic ocean, carrying the music of our world and the diagrams of our bodies out into an infinite and welcoming darkness. It is a story of triumph, of grace, of humanity stretching its fingers just far enough to touch the edge of something magnificent. It is also, from the perspective of the physics, almost entirely wrong. The universe does not care about our poetry. What those probes are actually moving through, what they are actually experiencing at this very moment, is not a serene cosmic highway. It is a mechanical wasteland of such profound hostility, such absolute thermodynamic indifference, that the romantic framing we have constructed around their journey begins to dissolve the moment you confront the actual numbers. To understand what Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 have crossed into and what they are moving toward, you must first understand what they have left behind and why leaving it behind was not a graduation but a fall. Picture, if you will, a single candle. Not a large candle, not a torch, but a small trembling flame, the kind that flickers when you exhale from across a room. Now place that candle on the surface of an ocean, not a calm ocean, not the kind you might swim in on a warm afternoon, but a black, freezing, turbulent ocean of incomprehensible scale, an ocean that stretches in every direction without a shoreline, without a bottom, without a single point of warmth anywhere beyond the tiny sphere of faint light that your candle manages to push back against the dark. The candle is our sun, the infinitesimally small bubble of warmth and light it radiates outward in every direction, the sphere of influence it carves against the crushing pressure of the surrounding fluid that is the heliosphere. It is, in the most physically precise sense, the only thing standing between our world and the raw, unfiltered violence of the galaxy. Now imagine a single microscopic speck of dust, a fragment so small it is invisible to the human eye, sitting on the surface of that candle. It gets ejected, it travels outward through the warmth, through the thinning heat, through the increasingly uncertain boundary where the candle's influence begins to lose its argument with the surrounding ocean. And then it crosses over. It leaves the warmth entirely, and it sinks into the fluid beyond. That is not a metaphor designed to frighten you. That is, within the limits of human language, a structurally accurate description of what the Voyager probes have done. To understand the first brutal truth of what they encountered, you have to understand what happens at the place where the solar wind stops winning. Our sun is constantly exhaling. It pushes a continuous stream of charged plasma, protons and electrons moving at hundreds of kilometers per second outward in every direction. This solar wind inflates the heliosphere, pressing against the interstellar medium, the ancient, cold, diffuse gas and dust that fills the space between all the stars of our galaxy. For billions of miles, the sun wins this argument. The solar wind moves fast enough and carries enough momentum to keep the interstellar medium at bay, to define a boundary, a pressure equilibrium, where our local environment ends and the galaxy begins. But the solar wind cannot maintain its speed forever. As it travels outward, it thins, it slows, and at a certain point, it encounters the wall of interstellar pressure head-on. This is the termination shock. This is where the solar wind, which has been moving supersonically for its entire journey, abruptly decelerates. The physics here are not gentle. When a supersonic flow hits a barrier, it cannot push through. The kinetic energy of that motion has to go somewhere, and it goes into heat. The plasma compresses. The magnetic field lines tangle and buckle. The temperature of the solar wind in this region spikes dramatically, even as its velocity collapses. Voyager 1 crossed this boundary in 2004. Voyager 2 crossed it in 2007. What they moved into on the other side was the heliosheath, and the heliosheath is not a quiet place. The heliosheath is a churning, magnetically chaotic transition zone, a graveyard where the ordered radiation of our sun is systematically crushed by the opposing pressure of the galaxy. The magnetic field in this region does not follow the clean, predictable patterns of the inner solar system. It folds back on itself. It creates large-scale structures of compressed plasma and tangled field lines that instruments aboard the probes were not fully designed to characterize. The data coming back from Voyager 1 during its heliosheath transit described an environment far more turbulent, far more structurally violent than the models had predicted. This was not a smooth crossing. This was a mechanical gauntlet. And then in 2012, Voyager 1 crossed the heliopause, the true boundary where solar wind pressure finally surrenders to the interstellar medium completely, and the instruments confirmed something that sent a precise physical chill through the scientific community. The density of the plasma around the probe increased sharply. The direction of the magnetic field shifted by a significant angle. The probe was, without any ambiguity, no longer inside our sun's protective bubble. It was in the interstellar medium. It was in the ocean. Now comes the second truth, and this is the one that most profoundly dismantles the popular understanding of what the Voyager probes have accomplished. When the news arrived that Voyager 1 had crossed the heliopause, the headlines were nearly uniform. They said the probe had left the solar system. Reporters, commentators, and even some scientists used that language, and it is physically, geometrically, mathematically inaccurate by a factor that should reframe your entire intuition about the scale of our gravitational home. The solar system does not end at the heliopause. The heliopause is the edge of the heliosphere, the edge of the sun's direct magnetic and plasma influence. But the gravitational reach of the sun extends incomparably further, surrounding our solar system at a distance that begins somewhere around 2,000 astronomical units from the sun and extends as far as 100,000 astronomical units outward. There is a structure called the Oort Cloud. It is a vast, spherical shell of frozen objects, the remnants of the early solar system, comets that were gravitationally scattered outward billions of years ago and have been sitting in near complete stillness ever since. These objects are gravitationally bound to our sun. They orbit it on timescales of millions of years, but they orbit it. They are as much a part of our solar system as the Earth you are standing on. The Oort Cloud stretches at its outer edge, approximately halfway to the nearest star system, Proxima Centauri. Think about what that means in terms of travel time. Voyager 1 is moving at approximately 17 kilometers per second, which is roughly 38,000 miles per hour. This is, by any human standard, an almost incomprehensible speed. It is fast enough to cross the continental United States in under 2 minutes. And yet, at that speed, it will take Voyager 1 approximately 300 years just to reach the inner boundary of the Oort Cloud. To cross through the full extent of the Oort Cloud entirely and emerge on the other side will take somewhere between 20,000 and 100,000 years. The probe that we launched in 1977, the probe that has been traveling faster than any human-made object in history for nearly 5 decades, is, in terms of the geometry of our gravitational home, barely outside the front door. This is not a poetic observation. This is a precise structural statement about the actual topology of the solar system, and it completely reframes the achievement of the Voyager mission. The probes have not left the solar system. They have crossed from one room of an incomprehensibly large house into a different, colder, darker room, and they face tens of thousands of years of travel before they could legitimately claim to have crossed the threshold of our gravitational neighborhood. The third truth is perhaps the most absolute, the one that operates on a time scale so long it begins to feel like a different category of physical reality entirely. Even if we set aside the Oort Cloud, even if we grant the probes the symbolic victory of having entered the true interstellar medium, what awaits them there is not preservation. It is not a clean journey through frictionless space toward the next star. What awaits them is the second law of thermodynamics operating with the patient, absolute indifference of deep time. The probes are warm. They carry heat. Their radioactive power sources, their electronics, their structural materials all retain thermal energy above the background temperature of the interstellar medium, which is approximately 2.7 degrees above absolute zero, the temperature set by the cosmic microwave background radiation, the faint afterglow of the Big Bang itself. The second law of thermodynamics is, in a physical sense, the most inviolable constraint in nature. Heat flows from regions of higher temperature to regions of lower temperature, and it does not stop flowing until equilibrium is reached. The probes are a warm speck sinking into a 2.7-degree ocean. Over time, on the scale of tens of thousands of years, they will radiate their internal heat into the vacuum. Their power sources will decay. Their electronics will cool toward the background temperature. They will become, in the most physically precise language available, dead mechanical husks, perfectly cold, perfectly dark, perfectly indistinguishable thermodynamically from the void that surrounds them. But the story does not end there, because matter persists even when function does not. The probes will continue to travel. Absent a gravitational encounter with another massive body, they will move through the interstellar medium for millions, then hundreds of millions, then billions of years. And during that time, the medium through which they travel will not leave them alone. The interstellar medium is not empty. It contains diffuse gas, microscopic dust grains, and highly energetic particles called cosmic rays, protons and atomic nuclei, accelerated to near light speed by the remnants of stellar explosions scattered throughout the galaxy. These particles are not gentle. Over geological timescales, they will collide with the surfaces of the probes continuously, eroding the metal, degrading the electronics, sputtering atoms off the surface of the golden records molecule by molecule. The golden records, those extraordinary physical objects, each containing audio, images, and mathematical information representing the existence of our civilization, are perhaps the most poignant symbols of human ambition ever constructed. They are made of gold-plated copper, chosen for its corrosion resistance and longevity. In ordinary conditions, gold is among the most durable materials we know. In the interstellar medium, over timescales of hundreds of millions to billions of years, it is not durable enough. The relentless friction of cosmic ray bombardment and interstellar dust impacts will gradually ablate the surface of the records. The microscopic grooves that encode our music, our languages, our greetings in 55 human voices will be worn smooth. The information will be converted, grain by grain, collision by collision, into thermodynamic noise. Our cosmic message will not be received. It will be ground into the physical equivalent of silence by the same statistical laws that govern the behavior of every closed system in the universe, the inevitable progression from order to disorder that defines the arrow of time itself. What remains then, after you have stripped away the romantic narrative and confronted the actual physics, is something more demanding than comfort and more durable than fantasy. We are a biological species. We are warm, fragile, metabolically expensive structures built from the same atomic material as the stars that forged us. We evolved on a single planet, orbiting a single unremarkable star, inside a protective plasma bubble that is, on the scale of the galaxy, genuinely microscopic. We have no natural mechanism for sensing magnetic field lines or measuring cosmic ray flux. We have no biological organ that perceives the curvature of space-time or the thermodynamic gradient between our sun and the void. And yet we built instruments that did all of those things. We strapped them to a vehicle, aimed them at the darkness, and gave them enough velocity to physically pierce the outer skin of the only shelter our species has ever known. 2 of those instruments are out there right now, still transmitting, still sending data across more than 22 billion kilometers of space at the speed of light, arriving at the deep space network as signals so faint they require antennas the size of buildings to detect. That is not a comforting story. It is not a story about peace or arrival or the beginning of a galactic civilization. It is a story about the precise, unsparing nature of physical law, and about the extraordinary improbability of a warm, conscious, curious species arising within a temporary plasma bubble on a pale blue point of light, and choosing with full knowledge of the scale of the darkness to send a piece of itself into it anyway. The void beyond the heliopause does not care about the golden record. It does not care about the plutonium heartbeat of the power source or the aluminum frame holding the instruments in alignment. It is 2.7 degrees above absolute zero. It is ancient, it is patient, and it has already begun the long, quiet, thermodynamically inevitable work of taking back what we sent into it. And the fact that we sent it at all, that is the only physics that has ever made me genuinely stop and sit with the weight of what it means to be a conscious arrangement of matter in a universe this large, this cold, and this indifferent to our presence within it.